The Threx dominion had stood for thousands of years, rising through fire, storms, and endless battles. Its people were tall, strong, and proud warriors carved from stone and tradition. And at the center of all those traditions stood Queen Illyrienne, the monarch of 10 sons. She was the strongest of her generation, a figure of such commanding presence that even the fiercest generals lowered their gaze in her presence. It was said she could lift a star-forged spear with one hand and bend metal with her bare claws. No one, not even her closest advisors, ever imagined she would marry a human. On the morning of the announcement, the Dominion Palace buzzed like a shaken hive. Tall, armored guards whispered to each other, scientists exchanged nervous glances, and diplomats hurried across the marble halls in disbelief. Humans were allies, yes. Humans were clever, yes. But they were small, fragile, soft compared to the Threx. They were known for ideas, not physical strength, and their short lives made them seem like flickering candles next to Threx' eternal flames. Yet the Queen had chosen one. Commander James Rourke stood calmly at her side during the ceremony, looking impossibly tiny in comparison. His dark hair was tied back, his posture straight and steady. He wore his ceremonial uniform simple, clean, nothing compared to the shining armor of Threx nobility. But his expression was strong, steady, and without fear. Even while thousands of alien eyes studied him like he was an insect walking across a war drum, many whispered he was only there for politics. Some believed he must have some hidden power, others decided he had simply gone mad. But none of them saw what Illyrienne saw. From the moment she had met him during an alliance negotiation, she noticed something rare. Humans were not physically powerful, but their eyes carried a different strength. Quiet, persistent, unbreaking. And James had that strength stronger than most. Where Threx warriors roared, he remained calm. Where others grew frustrated or aggressive, he thought carefully, choosing each word with purpose. His mind was sharp as a blade, and his confidence had no arrogance, only certainty. Over months of working together, Illyrienne found herself drawn to him, not because of his size or appearance, but because he did not treat her with fear. Everyone feared her, James did not. When she grew angry, he stood still. When she shouted at a council chamber, he replied with a steady voice. When she made decisions that others questioned, he defended her logic, even when he disagreed. And when he disagreed, he told her honestly. The Queen had never known someone who could look her in the eye without flinching, without challenging her, without worshipping her. He simply looked at her as a person. It was refreshing. It was dangerous. It was comforting. It was unfamiliar. That was why, when she announced that she intended to marry him, the Empire nearly fractured in shock. But Illyrienne did not bend for tradition or expectation. She never had, and James, quiet, sharp, careful James, simply nodded beside her, as though he had expected the uproar. After the ceremony, the palace settled into uneasy silence. The Empire watched carefully, waiting for something to go wrong, but nothing did. James adapted quickly to the palace routines, despite the enormous differences. The food was alien, the customs confusing, and the halls filled with warriors 3 times his height, but he greeted every challenge with patience. He walked through the palace like he belonged there, even if the guards stared down at him in disbelief. Illyrienne found herself observing him more closely than she expected. In the mornings, she watched him study Threx language patterns, repeating difficult sounds until he mastered them. In the afternoons, he sat with generals twice his size, fearlessly pointing out flaws in their battle plans when they asked for his advice. And in the evenings, he joined her on the balcony overlooking the Dominion capital, speaking softly about philosophy, strategy, and the strange beauty of alien sunsets. There was no fear in him, but there was something else, something she could not identify. One evening, as the suns lowered behind the mountains, Illyrienne finally asked him what she had been wondering since the ceremony. "Do you ever feel out of place among my people?" she asked, keeping her voice gentle. Her tall figure cast a long shadow over the balcony, while James leaned comfortably against the railing beside her. "No," he said simply. She blinked. "No?" He shook his head. "I don't see myself as smaller or weaker. I see myself as different. That's not a problem unless someone decides it is. Illyrian felt a strange warmth. Many humans would feel overwhelmed here. I'm not many humans, he replied. She knew that already. But hearing him say it stirred something inside her, admiration mixed with curiosity. James continued. Every species has something unique. Threx have strength, endurance, and honor. Humans, we make do with what we have. We build, we adapt, and we move forward. That's our strength. It was the first time she realized that humans had a kind of power the Threx did not understand. Not a physical one, not a political one, something deeper, but it was only the beginning. As days turned into weeks, the Dominion began preparing for a new threat, the Varrock swarm. Old data satellites had detected strange movements on the borders, and ancient stories whispered that the swarm once devoured whole star systems. The Queen's advisors urged her to prepare the army, and she did, though she kept the growing worry hidden behind her stern mask. James noticed anyway. You're afraid of what's coming, he said quietly one night as they reviewed reports together. Illyrian stiffened. A queen does not show fear, but she feels it, he replied. He said it without judgment, without weakness, without pity. She exhaled slowly. Yes, I fear losing my people. I fear not being strong enough to protect them. James studied the holomap of the border territories. Then, we prepare. But not the way your generals expect. What do you mean? She asked. The Varrock adapt, so must we. He leaned forward, adjusting the projection. Illyrian watched as he outlined strategies simple but sharp. Using human unpredictability mixed with Threx discipline, he introduced new formations based on historical Terran battles, adjusted by his understanding of alien capabilities. His ideas were creative and dangerous, and brilliant. The Queen was impressed, though she didn't say it out loud. Not yet. Still, something nagged at her. James, I know humans are mentally strong, but the Varrock are physically overwhelming. You should not be near the front lines if war comes. He didn't respond right away. His eyes remained fixed on the map. I won't hide, he said at last. Illyrian felt her chest tighten. You are not a soldier of the Dominion. No, he said, but I am a soldier, and I am your partner. Humans don't run from their responsibilities. The Queen had no answer for that. She had never met someone with such stubborn courage, or such stubborn recklessness. Days passed, and the tension in the Dominion grew thicker. Finally, news arrived. A frontier colony had gone silent. No signals. No survivors. The Varrock had returned. The palace shifted into chaos. Generals summoned troops. Fleets prepared to mobilize. And citizens whispered in fear. Illyrian moved like a storm through the halls, issuing commands with thunder in her voice. The Threx knew war. They knew how to fight. But even they felt the cold dread in the air. James watched everything with a calm expression Illyrian couldn't understand. That day, he visited the training grounds, studying the soldiers as they prepared. He did not lift the heavy Threx weapons, his body wasn't built for that, but he asked questions, learned movements, studied tactics. The soldiers stared at him skeptically, but his quiet confidence never wavered. Later, as the sun set red over the city, Illyrian approached him. You worry me, she said. James looked up. Why? You act as though you have some plan, as though you know what is coming. He gave a small smile. I don't know what is coming, but I know humans, and I know myself. And what does that mean? She asked. It means, he said softly, that fear does not control me. It sharpens me. Illyrian realized then that she had underestimated something very important. Humans were not physically strong, but their minds, their hearts, their spirits, those things were powerful in ways the Threx did not understand. Even so, she still believed one thing. When war came, James would remain safely behind the lines. She did not know that he had already begun preparing to break that rule. She did not know that he spent nights studying Dominion tactics, comparing them to human strategies, creating new ones in secret. She did not know he was training. She did not know he planned to stand beside her no matter the danger. For now, she only saw the calm man she had married, with steady eyes and quiet words. But soon, she would see the truth. Soon, she would learn what human strength really meant. And when that moment came, the alien queen would stare in awe. The Threx dominion had been at peace for many years. But peace in the galaxy was always fragile. It could shatter in a single moment, like thin glass touched by flame, and that moment arrived sooner than anyone expected. Only 3 days after the loss of the frontier colony, a second outpost went silent. No warning, no message. The kind of silence that meant something terrible had happened. The palace alarms echoed through the halls, and every general, commander, and advisor rushed to the Queen's war chamber. Queen Illyrienne stood at the center, tall and fierce, her golden armor reflecting the blue light of the tactical screens. Her voice was steady, but her eyes showed the weight of responsibility. The Threx people trusted her with their lives, and she would not allow fear to weaken her. James arrived quietly, not as a soldier, but as her husband and strategist. Even though he was much smaller than every warrior in the room, he walked with purpose. His boots tapped against the metal floor with a calm rhythm, not slow, not hurried, simply confident. And somehow, that calmness made others feel steadier too. A hologram of the border flickered above the war table. Markers showed destroyed settlements, lost ships, and broken routes. The Varrock swarm has breached our defenses faster than predicted, General Corvan reported. Their numbers are greater than past records. Their patterns are unfamiliar. It appears they have evolved again. A heavy silence followed. Illyrienne spoke first. Begin evacuation of nearby colonies. Concentrate our fleets at Carmal. It will be the next target. James studied the map. They're not just attacking randomly, he said softly. Look here, and here. He reached out, adjusting 2 markers. Even though his hands were tiny compared to the claws of Threx soldiers, his movements were steady. They're creating a corridor, he explained. A path straight to your central worlds. The generals exchanged uneasy looks. How can you be certain, human? One of them asked. Because this is how humans once fought in ancient wars, James answered. Cut through the outer defenses, isolate the heart, and strike before the enemy reorganizes. Illyrienne nodded slowly. It fits the pattern. General Corvan sighed. Then we must prepare for a long war. If you have no taken, in none. And this car, not long, James replied. Fast, the swarm always moves fast. The Queen noticed something in his voice, quiet determination mixed with something heavier. Something personal. But she didn't ask yet. The room erupted in discussions, strategies, fleet formations, and defense plans. Illyrienne gave orders with the force of a thunderstorm, commanding with total authority. But throughout it all, James listened carefully, absorbing every detail like a sponge. Later, when the war council ended, Illyrienne walked beside him through the palace corridors. You spoke as though you have seen something like this before, she said. James hesitated. Humans have fought enemies who attacked without mercy. Different species, different times. But the fear is the same. Illyrienne slowed her steps, sensing the heaviness in his tone. You lost people. I did, he said quietly. That's why I don't want to stand back and watch it happen again. The Queen's chest tightened slightly. She had known he experienced war, but she never asked him what he had lost. Now, she wondered, not out of duty, but out of care. Still, she respected his silence. If he wanted to share, he would. As days passed, the Dominion prepared for the coming storm. Troops left their homes, ships filled the skies, and civilians were moved to safe zones. News spread through the Empire, carrying fear with it. The Varrock swarm was a name mothers whispered to their children to warn them about darkness. Now that darkness was real again, Illyrienne trained daily with her elite guards, preparing her mind and body. She fought with spears, shields, and bare hands, moving with the strength of a warrior born to command armies. James trained too, though in a different way. Since he could not match the Threx in pure strength, he focused on speed, awareness, and strategy. He studied their battle drills, learned to use their lighter weapons, and practiced evasive maneuvers. He ran through simulation after simulation, studying swarm patterns, learning weak points, and building new formations. Threx soldiers who once doubted him now watched with respect. He stayed up late every night, reviewing maps and writing notes. Not because anyone asked him to, but because he refused to enter war unprepared. One evening, Illyrian found him alone in the library, leaning over dozens of glowing screens. His eyes were tired, but his focus was sharp. "You should rest," she said gently. "I will after I finish this section," he replied. She approached him slowly. "You take on too much." "I take only what I must," James answered. "Your people need you strong. And you need support. I'm here to give it." Illyrian looked down at him, touched by the quiet promise behind his words. No one had ever supported her in that way, not out of duty, not out of fear, but out of loyalty. Still, she worried. "If danger comes, you will stay in the command center." He did not look up. "I can't promise that, James." Her voice held warning. He finally met her eyes. "I won't stand by and watch others fight while I hide behind walls." Humans don't abandon their partners. She wanted to argue. She wanted to order him to stay safe. But she knew he would not obey. Not out of rebellion, but out of responsibility. She saw something burning in him. Something she did not fully understand yet. The next morning brought terrible news. The Varrock swarm had reached Carmel. The planet was one of the Dominion's key worlds, filled with factories, shipyards, and millions of citizens. Losing it would start a chain reaction across the Empire. Illyrian's blood ran cold when she saw the first reports. Dozens of swarm ships entering orbit, ground forces landing on multiple continents, and communication systems collapsing. There was no time to hesitate. The Queen ordered her fleet to mobilize immediately. The skies above the capital filled with warships fueled and ready. The air shook with engines, and the ground trembled beneath marching troops. James followed Illyrian onto the command ship. It was her flagship, the Radiant Spear, massive and shining like a blade forged for a god. He watched soldiers take their stations, pilots prepare for launch, and engineers check energy cores. They moved with perfect discipline. Yet James noticed something else in their eyes: fear. Quiet, hidden, but real. He stepped among them, speaking calmly. "You've trained for this. You know your strengths. Trust each other. Trust your queen. You are not alone in this fight." The soldiers straightened, their fear easing slightly. His voice did not boom like Illyrian's. It did not roar like a Threx war leader. It was steady. Human steady. And it worked. Soon, the fleet launched into space, heading straight toward Carmel. The journey took hours, and tension grew with every passing minute. Illyrian stood at the center of the bridge, sharp-eyed and ready. James stood beside her, reading incoming reports, analyzing enemy movements, and offering suggestions when needed. Finally, the fleet dropped out of warp. Carmel appeared before them, once bright and peaceful, now dark and scarred. Fires burned across the continents, and swarm ships hovered like shadows around the planet. Illyrian's heart tightened. Her people were down there, and they were suffering. "Prepare for battle," she commanded. The Radiant Spear moved forward, leading the charge. Dominion ships fired beams of energy, cutting through the darkness. Varrock vessels responded quickly, their strange organic hulls glowing with eerie light. Explosions flashed in the void like silent fireworks. James watched with focused eyes. "Their formation is different this time. They're adapting already." "They always adapt," Illyrian replied, gripping the controls. The fleet engaged fiercely, but despite their best efforts, the swarm forces were overwhelming. Carmel's defense line faltered, and distress signals poured in from the surface. Civilians trapped, soldiers cornered, outposts falling. Illyrian's jaw tightened. "We must land ground units. I will lead them myself." James looked at her carefully. "I'm going with you." "No. The ground will be dangerous. All the more reason you shouldn't go alone," he said simply. She stared at him, caught between fear and admiration. But she knew arguments were useless. He would help, even if she forbade it. The landing ships prepared for descent. The Queen boarded one with her elite guard. James stepped inside beside her, fastening his armor lighter than Threk's armor, but strong enough to give some protection. The doors sealed, and the ship dropped toward the burning world below. Through the small window, James watched Carmel's surface flash with explosions and smoke. He clenched his fists, not with fear, but with determination. Illyrian glanced at him, surprised by the fire in his eyes. She had seen many warriors in her life, but none quite like him. The landing ship shook violently as they entered the atmosphere. Soldiers held onto straps and rails, bracing for impact. Illyrian stood firm like a mountain. James held his stance too, steady despite the turbulence. As they neared the ground, the pilot shouted, "Prepare for immediate combat." The ship dropped fast, metal groaning under stress. Fire streaked across the view as they descended into chaos. Illyrian felt her pulse quicken. James felt something else, a calm readiness, as if every challenge he had ever faced had led him to this moment. The ship slammed onto the surface, doors opening into smoke and debris. The Queen stepped out first, raising her spear. Her soldiers followed with fierce determination. James stepped out last, small compared to the towering warriors, but his presence seemed to shine brighter than before. The battle for Carmel had begun, and James Rourke would not stand at the back. He had come to fight, he had come to protect. He had come to show what human strength truly meant. The moment James stepped out of the landing ship and onto the soil of Carmel, he felt the heat of destruction around him. Smoke covered the sky, buildings stood broken like fallen giants. The air trembled with distant explosions. The ground shook with each impact, reminding him that the swarm was close, too close. Threk's soldiers formed a defensive circle the second they landed, their tall armor shining despite the dust and fire. Queen Illyrian stood at the front, spear raised, her presence like a shield made of strength and authority. She had led countless battles before, but this one felt different. The swarm did not behave like any enemy she had faced. They moved with strange precision, changing strategies faster than her commanders could respond. And beside her stood James Rourke, small, human, physically outmatched but unshaken. His eyes swept across the battlefield, sharp and calculating. A Threk's captain ran toward them. "Your Majesty, the eastern line is collapsing. Civilians are trapped in the industrial district." Illyrian nodded. "Prepare squads for immediate rescue. We cannot lose the district." James spoke before anyone could move. "Send half the soldiers to reinforce the eastern line. The rest should secure evacuation routes. If you send all units to one place, the swarm will flank and trap everyone." The captain blinked. "But he is correct," Illyrian said firmly. No one questioned him again. The Queen and James led the first squad to the industrial district. The streets were filled with broken machines, fallen towers, and empty vehicles abandoned mid-escape. The smell of burning metal hung heavy in the air. Every shadow made James alert. He kept his pulse steady and his breathing controlled. Threk's soldiers moved quickly, but James moved differently, lightly, quietly, checking corners, scanning angles. He was not strong like them, but he was observant. He saw things the others overlooked. They turned a corner and found the first group of survivors, civilians huddled inside a damaged transport shuttle. The door was jammed, debris blocking it. Smoke seeped through cracks. "Get them out," Illyrian ordered. Her soldiers grabbed the debris, but it was fused tightly. Several tried together, their bodies straining. The metal didn't budge. James stepped forward. "You're pulling from the wrong angle. The frame is twisted downward." Illyrian raised a brow. "You can open it?" "With your help," he replied. She nodded. The Threk's stepped back as James guided her. "Push here," he said, pointing to the upper corner. "And lift, not pull." Illyrian followed his instructions. With a single, powerful movement, the door ripped open. James immediately reached inside. "Come on. Move quickly." The civilians stumbled out, tall, frightened Threk's workers, shocked to see a tiny human helping them. One young Threx child stared at James with wide eyes. You saved us," the child whispered. James smiled softly. "We save who we can. Now run to the safe zone. Follow the guards." The rescued civilians hurried away. Illyrian watched James for a moment. Humans had small bodies, yes, but their hearts could fill a starship. They continued deeper into the district. The further they went, the louder the noise became. Strange clicking sounds echoed from the shadows, the sound of the swarm. "Stay alert," Illyrian warned. James held his weapon steady. It was small in his hands compared to the giant alien rifles, but he handled it with precision. Suddenly, something moved at the edge of the roof above them. A shadow, then another, then 3 more. The swarm had arrived. Without warning, they leaped downward. Illyrian barked an order, and her soldiers raised shields, blocking the first wave. The creatures struck with terrifying force, and James felt the shock travel through the ground. Illyrian swung her spear, knocking one aside. She fought like a storm, each movement powerful and fierce. James did not try to match the Threx in strength. Instead, he used speed and awareness. When a swarm creature lunged at him, he dodged quickly, slid to the side, and fired directly at a weak point behind its head. The shot hit perfectly, and the creature collapsed. A soldier nearby stared. "How did you hit that so accurately?" I aimed," James replied simply. Illyrian heard him and almost smiled, despite the chaos. More swarm soldiers poured into the district. They moved in strange, coordinated patterns, adjusting instantly to the Threx formations. Every time the Threx blocked one direction, the creatures changed angles. James shouted, "They're guiding us. They want to push us into the open street." Illyrian reacted immediately. "Fall back into the factory. Control the choke point. Move." Her troops obeyed, retreating into a large, metalworking factory. Inside, the space was narrow enough to limit the swarm's movement. The Queen took position at the entrance. Spear ready, James climbed onto a stack of crates to get a better view. He scanned the enemy movements, tracking their approach. His brain clicked rapidly, analyzing patterns. "They're coming from 3 sides," James called out. "Block the east door completely. Leave the west door half open. Force them into a funnel." Illyrian nodded. "You heard him. Do it." The soldiers moved fast, sealing the east side and preparing traps on the west. When the swarm finally surged inside, they were compressed into a tight formation. Illyrian charged. Her spear struck with unstoppable force. Threx soldiers followed, forming a wall of strength. James stayed behind them, firing when needed, always hitting weak points. His calm voice gave precise instructions. "Left side 2 incoming. Shield wall, tighten. Pressure from the back, rotate positions." Illyrian realized he was reading the entire battle like a strategy board. His brain worked at a speed that shocked even her. After several long minutes, the remaining swarm soldiers retreated, clicking angrily as they vanished back into the smoke. The factory grew quiet again, though the distant thunder of battle remained. Illyrian turned to James. "Your guidance saved many lives." James wiped sweat from his forehead. "We all did what we could." Her expression softened. "You did more than that." But there was no time for gratitude. Another distress call came through their comms. A large group of civilians was trapped beneath a collapsed power station. Illyrian led the team toward the station. When they arrived, they saw the structure half destroyed. Metal beams twisted and burning. Several Threx citizens were trapped under a massive support pillar. Even the strongest soldiers struggled to lift it. Illyrian stepped forward. "Help me," she ordered, but as she and 5 warriors pushed together, the pillar barely moved. James approached slowly. "Let me check." The soldiers stared at him like he had lost his mind. The pillar weighed as much as a dropship. "You cannot lift this," one warrior said. "I know," James replied calmly. "I'm checking the angle." He knelt beside the base, studying the way the metal had folded. He stood up. "Everyone is pushing in the wrong direction. You're fighting the weight instead of shifting it." Illyrian leaned close. Explain, James pointed. If you push here, no chance. But if you roll it off the support, the weight drops by half. One strong group can move it then. The Queen stared at him. How did you figure that out? James shrugged. Humans learn to work with whatever strength they have. Sometimes we use brains instead of muscles. Illyrian placed her massive hand on the spot he indicated. Very well. She called 6 of her strongest warriors. Together, they positioned themselves exactly as James instructed. Ready, she said. James stepped back. Push now slowly. Don't lift, just roll. They did. And this time, the giant pillar shifted. The trapped civilians crawled out quickly, crying with relief. When they saw James, they bowed with gratitude even though he was small. Even though he wasn't Threx. They bowed because they finally understood. Strength came in many forms. Illyrian watched James carefully. Every moment on this battlefield revealed something new about him. He did not possess Threx strength. He did not possess alien weapons. He possessed something rarer, an unbreakable spirit, and a mind that refused to surrender. They continued through Carmel, rescuing groups, coordinating defenses, and building temporary shelters. Everywhere they went, James inspired confidence. Soldiers followed his suggestions without doubt. Civilians trusted him instantly. Even Illyrian felt steadier when he stood beside her. But the battle was far from won. Near nightfall, a massive explosion shook the entire district. A communication tower collapsed, sending debris into the air. Reports flooded in. The central command base is under attack. Illyrian's heart froze. If the base fell, all coordination would collapse. We have to help them, she said. James nodded immediately. Then we go now. They moved quickly, pushing through ruined streets until they saw the base surrounded by hordes of swarm soldiers. Threx defenders were scattered, overwhelmed. Illyrian tightened her grip on her spear. This will be the hardest fight yet. James stepped beside her, eyes steady. I'm ready. The Queen looked at him carefully, seeing a fire she had never seen before. Not human fear, not human hesitation, but pure human determination. James Rourke, she said softly. You surprise me more every hour. He gave a small smile. I'm just doing what humans do, standing our ground. Then they charged toward the burning command base, side by side, human and alien, each ready to face the storm. The command base of Carmel burned like a wounded giant. Smoke rose into the sky in long, dark lines. Bright flashes of energy lit up the battlefield as Dominion soldiers fought desperately to protect the last stronghold left on the planet. If this base fell, every defensive unit across Carmel would lose coordination. The swarm knew this. That was why they struck here with everything they had. Queen Illyrian rushed forward at the head of her squad, James Rourke running beside her with fast, determined steps. Even though he could never match the long strides of the Threx, he moved with a speed born from pure will. The closer they came to the base, the louder the chaos grew. Shouts of soldiers, crackling weapons, and the strange clicking voices of the swarm. Illyrian raised her spear. Form defensive lines. Protect the wounded. Push forward step by step. Her soldiers obeyed instantly. They moved into formation, blocking incoming attacks with shields and returning fire with steady precision. James scanned the battlefield quickly. His eyes searched for weaknesses, opportunities, anything they could use. A swarm of enemy units was climbing the western tower, trying to disable the remaining communication dish. We can't let them reach that tower, James said. If the dish falls, all long-range communication will be lost. Illyrian nodded. Take a squad and stop them. No, he replied quickly. You go. You're the only one strong enough to clear them fast. Illyrian looked down at him with concern. And what will you do? James pointed toward the ground forces attacking the main entrance. They're repeating the same pattern every 2 minutes. I can break it. The Queen hesitated. Alone? 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 James met her eyes. I won't be alone. Your soldiers will cover me. And I trust them. Illyrian stared at him for a heartbeat. Then she put her hand on his shoulder, a gesture only given to those she deeply respected. "Return to me safely," she said softly. "I will," James answered, steady as ever. The queen charged toward the tower, her soldiers following behind her like a tidal wave of steel. James turned toward the front entrance, drawing his smaller weapon and taking a deep breath. He felt the weight of fear pressing at the edge of his mind. But he did not let it in. His entire life had prepared him for moments like this, moments where everything seemed impossible. Yet retreat was not an option. He ran forward. The first wave of swarm soldiers lunged toward him. James didn't try to overpower them. He slid under a swinging arm, rolled behind a broken wall, and fired at the creature's weak spot. It fell instantly. 3 more charged. He dodged behind debris, using the environment instead of force. Every move was precise, every shot carefully aimed. Threk's soldiers noticed how he moved, not with strength, but with impossible focus. "Protect the human strategist," a soldier shouted. 2 warriors formed a shield wall around him while he shouted directions. "Left side, move forward 2 steps. Shift right, pressure building. Avoid the center, they're trying to corner you." His voice was calm, even while his heart pounded inside his chest. Threk's soldiers adjusted their formations exactly as he commanded, and the swarm attackers began to falter. For a moment, James felt hope. Then the ground shook. A larger swarm creature crawled into view. Its massive form towered over the soldiers. Its body glowed with strange energy, and every step it took cracked the ground beneath it. A Threk's warrior whispered, "We cannot defeat that thing." James stepped forward without thinking. "Yes, we can." He swallowed hard and analyzed the creature. Its movement was heavy, but the joints looked unstable. "I need 2 soldiers to distract it," he said. "Don't fight it, just get its attention." The warriors hesitated, but James already moved. He ran toward the creature, firing small shots at its legs. The shots did little damage, but they made the creature turn. It roared and charged at him. "Human, retreat," someone shouted. But James didn't run. He glanced at the ground and noticed a deep crack where a piece of the tower had fallen earlier. He sprinted toward it. The creature followed, each heavy step shaking the earth. At the last moment, James jumped across the crack. The creature stepped forward, and its weight was too much for the weakened ground. The dirt collapsed under it, trapping one leg. "Now!" James shouted. Threk's soldiers rushed forward, striking the trapped creature from all sides. With its movement limited, the giant monster fell. When it finally stopped moving, the soldiers cheered. A Threk's guard looked at James with awe. "How did you know the ground would give way?" James breathed heavily. "I didn't know for sure, but it was the best chance we had." The soldiers stared at him with a kind of respect humans rarely received in the Dominion, but there was no time to rest. More swarm units approached, and the battle raged on. Meanwhile, Illyrienne climbed the western tower with incredible speed. The structure shook with every impact, and the wind whipped around her, carrying dust and sparks. Swarm creatures crawled toward the communication dish, their limbs clinging to the metal like living weapons. She leaped across a gap, landed hard on the tower's upper beam, and swung her spear in a wide arc. Several creatures fell instantly. More replaced them. Her soldiers arrived behind her, forming a defensive ring. But the queen did not wait. She pushed forward, her movements sharp and powerful. Her spear struck one enemy, then another. She moved like a storm, her breath steady, her eyes fierce. The swarm creatures tried to surround her, but she broke their formation with sheer force. Within minutes, the tower was cleared, and the communication dish remained intact. A soldier approached her. "Your Majesty," the human strategist requested an update. He is still fighting alone at the front." Illyrienne froze. "James." She didn't waste a second. "You have control of the tower. Hold it." "Aft, what about you?" the soldier asked. "I am going to him." James was still guiding the soldiers at the front, but he was beginning to tire. His arms ached. Sweat covered his forehead. His breathing grew heavier. He was human. After all, only human. But still, he refused to fall. A new wave of swarm attackers approached, and James steadied his stance. Even tired, his eyes remained sharp. He saw every movement, every angle, every opportunity. "Shift formation. Use the wall for support," he shouted. The soldiers obeyed immediately. They had begun trusting him completely. They fought with renewed strength, inspired by the unbreakable determination of the small humans standing among them. Illyrian arrived just as the next swarm wave closed in. When she saw James exhausted yet unshaken, dirty yet determined, surrounded but not afraid, something inside her changed. She ran to him instantly. "James!" He turned, relieved. "You're safe." Illyrian stepped in front of him just in time to block a creature's strike with her spear. She pushed forward, clearing space around him. "You should not be here alone," she said, her voice tight. James stood up straighter. "I wasn't alone. Your soldiers were with me. They follow you," she said. "They trust you." James gave a tired smile. "Then we win together." Illyrian stared at him for a moment, at this small human with a heart larger than any warrior she had ever known. "You are remarkable," she whispered, but he shook his head. "I'm just human. And humans keep trying, no matter how hard things get." Together, they pushed forward into the final part of the battle. The swarm forces were weakening. Dominion reinforcements arrived from the sky, landing all across Carmel. The enemy began to retreat, unable to overcome the sudden unity and determination of the defenders. Illyrian led the final charge. James guided the formation with perfect timing. Soldiers fought with hearts full of fire. Civilians were rescued. The command base held strong. At last, after hours of struggle, the swarm withdrew. Silence settled over the battlefield. Burned buildings stood like shadows. Smoke drifted through the air. Threx soldiers slumped to the ground in exhaustion. James exhaled slowly. His legs almost gave out, but Illyrian caught him before he fell. "You fought bravely," she said gently. "So did you," he replied with a smile. She lifted him up easily, holding him with surprising tenderness. The soldiers around them watched with admiration, not only for their queen, but for the human who had stood among them without fear. One soldier spoke softly. "The queen's human. He saved all of us." Another added, "He fought like 10 warriors." Illyrian looked at her husband with pride shining in her eyes. "You showed strength beyond our understanding," she whispered. "Not the strength of muscles, but the strength of spirit. And I stand in awe." James smiled tiredly. "Humans don't give up, Illyrian. That's our strength." She pulled him close, holding him tightly as the sons of Carmel rose slowly through the smoke. Together, they had saved a world. Together, they had proven that human strength was not measured in size or power, but in courage, determination, and heart. And for the first time in her long life, the alien queen truly understood what it meant to admire someone with all her being. The war was not over, but with James at her side, she felt ready for anything. Humanity had shown its strength, and the galaxy would never forget it.